Dan works as a salesman at a used car dealership in New York. He's the dealership's top performer. Customers rarely leave without buying a car. His confidence, charm, and sales skills have made him everyone's favorite. One day, the manager asks Dan to join a celebration and take a photo for his latest achievement, but Dan politely declines. It's his wedding anniversary and he'd rather spend the evening with his family. At home, we meet his wife, Jessica, and their 3 kids, Kyle, Nina, and the youngest, Max. The house is already tense as Jessica argues with Nina. Nina had planned to attend one college, but now wants to follow her boyfriend to another, and Jessica isn't happy about it. Dan tries to calm things down, but Nina refuses to listen. Later, Dan tells Kyle to watch Max while he and Jessica go out for the night. Kyle quickly makes an excuse, claiming he has a group study session. When Dan asks Nina instead, she gets annoyed too. As soon as everyone leaves, the truth comes out. Kyle never had a study group. He's actually a famous online gamer, and his friends have gathered to spend the night gaming. Meanwhile, Dan and Jessica enjoy a rare date at an amusement park. Jessica admits she misses the kids, but also reminds Dan that he's always buried in work. She's been asking for a family vacation for a long time, yet he never seems to have the time. After spending the evening together, Jessica smiles and tells Dan she's glad they finally made time for each other. As they share a kiss, a group of teenagers secretly records them and starts making fun of them. Dan calmly asks them to delete the video before it ends up online. Instead, they mock him even more. One of them throws his drink all over Dan's head. Jessica steps in before things turn violent, and choosing not to fight back, Dan quietly walks away and heads home. The next day, Jessica heads to her boxing class to blow off some steam. Frustrated with everything happening at home, she takes out all her anger on the punching bag. In the middle of training, she accidentally hits another woman named Gwen. Jessica immediately apologizes, but Gwen simply laughs it off. As they chat, Jessica opens up about her family. She explains that Dan is always focused on work, the kids never listen, and her dream of taking a family vacation keeps getting pushed aside. Boxing has become her only escape. Before leaving, Gwen introduces herself as a travel agent and hands Jessica her business card, telling her to call if the family ever decides to take that vacation. Meanwhile, Dan is shopping at a grocery store when a stranger suddenly attacks him. What looks like a random fight quickly turns into something much bigger. Within seconds, Dan effortlessly takes the attacker down, revealing that he's far from an ordinary car salesman. Years ago, Dan was a highly trained government assassin. He left that life behind, disappeared without a trace, and started over with his family. But now someone has finally found him. The moment he gets home, Dan realizes his past has caught up with him. Knowing his family is in danger, he pulls a hidden stash of weapons and cash from beneath the stairs. He's done running. His first stop is Nina's college, only to learn she dropped out 9 months ago. Furious, Dan tracks her down under a bridge, hanging out with her friends. He storms over and confronts her. "What are you doing here? Why didn't you tell me you quit college?" Nina fires back. She says he never even bothered to read her article or understand her dreams, making her feel like she didn't matter. That's why she left the magazine community. Dan then takes Nina to meet Kyle at his friend Samir's house. But there, he discovers Kyle has been lying too. Kyle claimed he was going to study groups and chess classes, but he was actually spending his time playing online games. Dan feels betrayed by both of his children. He puts them in the car and drives straight to Jessica's workplace at the hospital. When he arrives, Dan tells Jessica that she always complained they never went on a family vacation. So now he's finally making it happen. They're going to Las Vegas. The family starts their trip, but Dan quickly notices a black vehicle following them. Realizing someone has tracked their location, he speeds away and heads back to his car dealership. After inspecting the car, Dan finds a hidden tracking device attached underneath. He secretly places it on another customer's vehicle and tells the driver to push the car as fast as possible. The pursuers follow the wrong vehicle, giving Dan and his family time to escape. As they continue their journey, Dan notices his family taking pictures and getting ready to post everything online. He quickly takes their phones away and tells them that this trip is about spending time together, not being stuck on their screens. The family doesn't understand why Dan is so serious, but he knows the real reason. Sharing their location could reveal where they are and put them in danger. Later, Dan stops at a small shop to buy a map. When he pays with cash, the shopkeeper becomes suspicious and suggests using a credit card. Dan refuses, leaves extra money, and quickly walks away. Back on the road, everyone sits silently. They're used to being glued to their phones, but now they have nothing to distract them. Slowly, they start talking, laughing, and singing together. For the first time in years, Dan's family begins enjoying the simple moments they had been missing. Back at Dan's house, we meet McCaffrey, a dangerous man searching for him. His men have completely searched the house, but they find nothing. They try tracking Dan's credit cards, but there's no activity. Even his children's social media accounts show nothing. Frustrated, McCaffrey orders his men to find Dan and his entire family as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Dan has checked into a hotel with his family, but when Kyle steps outside, he runs into a fan who recognizes him from his online gaming streams. She takes a selfie with him and immediately posts it online. The moment Dan sees, he realizes their location has been exposed. He quickly gathers everyone and prepares to leave. But soon, 3 men on motorcycles start following them. Dan notices they are wearing earpieces, so he turns up the car's speakers to block their communication. Then he takes them down one by one. He shoots the first attacker, forces the second one off the road with his car, and the third crashes into a billboard, causing a massive explosion. The noise wakes Jessica, but Dan quickly makes up an excuse and convinces her everything is fine. He drives through the night until morning, when he finally stops and gets some rest. Later, Nina wakes up and realizes they have reached the countryside. She tells Dan she wants to visit a nearby university, so he takes the family there. While walking around campus, Nina and Kyle have a rare heart-to-heart conversation. Nina opens up about her boyfriend, and Kyle actually listens and gives her advice. Nina is surprised and happy that her younger brother finally understands her. Meanwhile, Jessica tells Dan about her past. She used to be an athlete, but after marrying Dan, she dedicated herself to raising their family and gave up her own career. Hearing this, Dan decides it's time to finally reveal the truth about his past. But before he can say anything, he notices a suspicious man carrying a briefcase nearby. Something about him feels wrong, and Dan immediately walks toward him to find out who he really is. After talking to the man for a few minutes, Dan realizes he's just a businessman. The man explains that he traveled all the way from Germany to search for his missing daughter. Jessica is surprised by how quickly Dan judged the stranger and quietly walks away. To be sure, Dan opens the man's briefcase and finds nothing but bags of seeds. It confirms the man is exactly who he claimed to be. Just then, one of McCaffrey's assassins attacks. Dan fights him in a brutal hand-to-hand battle and eventually kills him before rejoining his family. Meanwhile, Nina decides to surprise her boyfriend at his dorm, but when he opens the door, she finds another girl inside. Heartbroken, she ends the relationship and runs back to the car in tears. Seeing Nina in tears, Dan walks over and asks what happened. She finally breaks down and tells him she caught her boyfriend with another girl. Instead of comforting her with empty words, he reminds her to stand up for herself. Encouraged by her father, Nina marches back, confronts her cheating boyfriend, and gives him a well-deserved beating. For the first time in a long while, she smiles. She even begins seeing her father in a different light. Dan then tells Nina that once the vacation is over, she's going back to the magazine community and chasing the dream she gave up. She agrees and thanks him for keeping everything from Jessica. The family finally arrives in Las Vegas. Once they're there, Dan contacts an old associate named Augie, who has been preparing fake passports so no one can trace the family. While waiting for Augie at a cafe, Dan is joined by Kyle. Their conversation turns surprisingly honest. Dan asks why Kyle is so determined to become a professional gamer. Kyle explains that the real world feels fake, while online he can truly be himself. He says competitive gaming isn't just about having fun. It takes quick thinking, sharp reflexes, and constant focus. Then he challenges Dan to a laser tag match. If Dan wins, Kyle will listen to whatever he says. But if Kyle wins, Dan has to support his gaming career. Dan accepts without hesitation. The match isn't even close. Thanks to years of elite combat training, Dan easily outplays Kyle. Kyle is disappointed, but instead of rubbing it in, Dan pulls him into a hug and reminds him that losing one challenge doesn't mean giving up on his dreams. The family checks into a hotel in Las Vegas where Dan finally meets his old contact, Augie. He collects a set of fake passports along with a stash of weapons. That evening, Dan plans to take Jessica out for dinner. Before leaving, he gives Kyle and Nina one strict rule. No matter what happens, stay inside the room and don't open the door for anyone. The moment their parents leave, Kyle and Nina ignore the warning and head to the hotel's gaming lounge. Meanwhile, Dan and Jessica walk to dinner, unaware that one of McCaffrey's men has spotted them and immediately reports their location. At the gaming lounge, Kyle meets a famous professional gamer named Ren, who introduces him to his team. Ren then invites Kyle to take his place in a live match. Kyle accepts the challenge, while Ren uses the opportunity to flirt with Nina instead. At dinner, Dan finally tells Jessica the truth. He reveals that he was once a government assassin who disappeared to give his family a normal life. Jessica is stunned and can barely believe what she's hearing. When Dan and Jessica return to the hotel, they're ambushed just outside their children's room. Dan quickly takes down two attackers, but a third assassin, Coogan, grabs Jessica and points a gun at her. Dan pretends to surrender, then quietly grabs a knife and drives it straight into Coogan's eye, killing him instantly. Seeing the fight with her own eyes, Jessica finally realizes Dan has been telling the truth all along. Moments later, they discover Kyle and Nina are gone. Dan and Jessica rush to the gaming lounge, where Kyle has just won the tournament, proving everyone wrong about his talent. They quickly pull the kids aside, and Dan finally tells them the truth, that he used to be a government assassin and that dangerous people are hunting him. Kyle and Nina think he's joking, until gunfire suddenly erupts across the casino. Dan throws his family behind cover and charges into the fight alone. He takes down attacker after attacker, only to realize they're all wearing bulletproof vests. Thinking fast, he creates a distraction, grabs his family, and escapes before the gunmen can surround them. With nowhere left to hide, Dan finally tells his family the whole truth. His real name is Sam. Years ago, he served in the military, where he met McCaffrey. Together, they formed a secret organization that eliminated criminals beyond the reach of the law. Sam became their deadliest assassin, but over time, he discovered the truth. McCaffrey wasn't fighting for justice. He was taking contracts for money and using Sam as his personal weapon. Refusing to become a hired killer, Sam walked away, erased his identity, became Dan, and built a normal life with his family. The confession devastates everyone. Kyle and Nina blame him for putting their lives in danger, while Jessica is furious that after 18 years of marriage, he's only now revealing who he really is. Feeling betrayed, Jessica secretly calls Gwen and asks her to arrange a trip for the family. Gwen agrees and gives her a meeting location. When they arrive, Gwen is waiting beside a private jet. Everything seems normal at first as they board and chat. During the flight, Gwen talks about the man who broke her heart 18 years earlier and married someone else. As Jessica listens, she suddenly realizes Gwen isn't talking about just anyone. She's talking about Dan. At that moment, McCaffrey arrives and the trap is revealed. Gwen had made a deal with him. In exchange for delivering Dan's family, McCaffrey promised to hand Dan over to her. Even after all these years, Gwen still believes Dan will choose her. After capturing the family, McCaffrey calls Dan and orders him to come alone to a casino. If he refuses, his family dies. Dan wastes no time. When he enters the casino, he finds his entire family tied up at gunpoint. McCaffrey welcomes him and finally reveals the truth to everyone. Dan is his son. He tells the family that Dan was the greatest assassin he had ever trained. But instead of embracing that life, he threw it all away to become an ordinary husband and father. To McCaffrey, that's the ultimate betrayal. He gives Dan one final choice: return to the organization or watch his family die. To save them, Dan agrees. He tells McCaffrey to let his family go, promising he'll do whatever he's asked. McCaffrey accepts the deal and orders his men to escort the family out. As they step into the elevator, Jessica refuses to leave her husband behind. Thinking fast, she grabs Max's diaper bag and uses it to knock one of the guards off balance, giving her family a chance to fight back. Upstairs, McCaffrey hands Dan over to Gwen. Believing she's finally won him back, Gwen moves closer, but Dan catches her off guard and knocks her unconscious. Moments later, Jessica reaches him. Downstairs, McCaffrey realizes something has gone wrong. Dan tells Kyle to launch a drone waiting outside and use it to track every enemy in the building. As Kyle guides him through the hallways, Dan rigs the casino with explosives. One by one, the bombs begin detonating, wiping out McCaffrey's men. Anyone left standing is taken down by Dan, with the Kyle directing him from above. Then Gwen regains consciousness. McCaffrey orders her to head to the rooftop, where Dan's family is hiding. Meanwhile, Dan confronts McCaffrey one last time. Pointing a gun at him, he gives his father one final chance to end everything peacefully. McCaffrey refuses. Instead, he orders his remaining men to open fire. Bullets fly everywhere, but Dan manages to stay alive. Kyle tries to help, but the enemies destroy the drone, cutting off his support. On the rooftop, Jessica hides the kids behind a table just as Gwen arrives. The two women engage in a brutal fight. Jessica gives everything she has, but Gwen is simply too skilled. Confident she's won, Gwen lets her guard down. That's all Jessica needs. She grabs a broken bamboo pole and drives it straight through Gwen's chest, killing her instantly. At the same time, McCaffrey gets the drop on Dan and points a gun at him. Just before he pulls the trigger, Nina suddenly calls out, "Grandpa!" The unexpected word catches McCaffrey off guard for a split second. Dan seizes the opportunity, knocks him to the ground, and overpowers him. Seconds later, the police storm in and arrest McCaffrey, finally bringing his reign to an end. Sometime later, life has completely changed for the family. Nina rejoins the magazine community and becomes a successful reporter. Dan starts a security company that protects banks, while Jessica follows her passion and becomes an athletic coach. Whenever they get the chance, the family still takes road trips together. But now they have one simple rule: no phones allowed. Instead of staring at screens, they spend their time talking, laughing, and enjoying every moment together.